So I messed up the video for this interview, so you're just going to hear the audio and a picture of who is speaking, and I hope you enjoy. Hey everyone, my name's Lily. I am the book blogger behind Utopia State of Mind, and as you can tell, this is a different video than normal. I'm so excited to do this though. I feel like I haven't done kind of intro into get to know me in a very long time, probably my first video, and it's been a while since that. And also, I'm always the one doing interviewing, so it's really fun to be able to be interviewed. And so I will let my lovely interviewer um, introduce themselves, and then we will get started in this interview.
Hey everyone, it's really nice to be here. I am Kriti. I blog at Armed with a Book. And Lily and I met a couple years ago when we did a panel for Right Hive. It was a book blogger related panel, and we had lots of fun talking about reviewing. And in the last couple months, I'm trying to be more active now and thought I'd reach out and just do something fun. I love reading with other readers and collaborating with book bloggers and bookstagrammers and booktubers, like anyone who just about reads. And so I'm really excited that Lily was open to this interview. So I get to know her through this interview and you get to know her too. So I hope you'll enjoy this.
Yeah, I'm excited, and I hope that we also have time to talk a little bit, like a little bit of a conversation as well, to talk a little bit about you and what you're doing as well. Because yeah, you're right. We met I was trying to think about like the exact times, when I was looking in our emails about when we met, and like I was thinking what the panel was called, and I totally forgot everything from like the last couple of years.
All right. Okay. Before I dive into them, just a quick note to everyone who's watching. A transcript of the actual interview is posted on my blog, so we'll add a link to that in the description so that you can check it out. All right, Lily. First and foremost, tell me about yourself. Tell me about your journey into book blogging and reviewing and everything.
So how did I start? I started over 6 years ago, and when I was starting, I was doing my master's. And I think this is a similar experience a lot of people have, where when you're in school, you kind of stop reading for fun. Or, I mean, you stop reading for fun and you stop reading things that you really love, probably. So for me, when I was doing my master's, this was a way to like make sure that I was always reading things that were interesting to me, even if they weren't like my favorite things. And actually, one of my it's not coworkers because we weren't working, we were just school people, but like one of my classmates, I was chatting with her, and she actually said, "Oh, like I think you should start a blog." So that's how I started. It wasn't even my idea. And when I first started, I was doing a bunch of. I first started and I only did sci fi fantasy. And also at the beginning, for some reason, I also wanted to do a lot of like magazine, sci fi fantasy magazine reviews, like short stories in magazines. Because that was something that was interesting, and I've never gone back to that ever again. Um, but that's how I first started, like the seed of it. And then it kind of has built from that point onwards. I've been getting more social media platforms under my belt. I've been, kind of expanding what I've been doing. I don't only do sci fi fantasy anymore. That's still my main focus. But, like, I feel like within the last couple of years, I've been just reviewing anything that I can read and anything that, will move me as a person. But yeah, that's kind of the start of the idea. And I think I don't know when I actually started the YouTube one. I feel like a couple years ago, maybe 2021 or 2020. It was kind of like my pandemic baby, how everyone's kind of like the things that they've cultivated in that time period. And I think for me, that was that kind of inspiration. And I think I probably wouldn't have normally done a YouTube channel either, except someone had also, an author had asked me to moderate a panel. And I was like, oh, it kind of has to be on YouTube, really. Um, and so that's how I've kept going, because I've had to basically. But I've started to have fun. It's more fun now than it was at the beginning.
That's good. The setup is always hard. I think it always takes a couple of years to get a feel for like how you want to put out content, what kind of content you want to put out, how you want to engage with other people in the community. I find that like I've been in book blogging. I blogged on and off for many, many years, but I got seriously into book blogging in 2019. And I feel it's just now, like 3, 4 years later, when I'm finally getting a hang of, okay, this is how I want to present things. This is what I want to write about. And these are the kind of people I want to host. And these are the books that I want to support. So it changes like as we grow. And like you said, even though you started with the science fiction fantasy side, you read a lot more now,
Mhm.
and our interests change, so it's really neat to like hear someone else talk about it rather than just
Yeah.
it's not just my own experience. So tell me a little bit about science fiction fantasy, like what stands out for you in these set of genres, because it has the speculative fiction and then the science fiction and the fantasy, like yeah, there's
Yeah.
so much there.
Oh boy. Yeah, so I feel like a little known fact about me because I don't say this a lot on the internet, so I guess I'm saying this now. Um, I did both my undergraduate degree and my master's degree in English lit. And then I had
Oh
to,
wow, that's amazing.
yeah, and for it, I had to write two theses. Like I had to write
Yeah.
one for undergrad, one for my master's. And they're actually both on sci fi like books.
Oh,
So it
nice.
started, I feel like my interest kind of started more academically. I have always loved fantasy for sure. I think that fantasy, but when I was younger, I think it was as an escape, right? I don't think I saw kind of the themes and the questions and the discussions that fantasy brings up until I was older, which I think is pretty, a commonplace experience for people.
Yeah, same.
And then I had kind of been exposed to sci-fi media, TV shows, movies and stuff as a kid growing up, but I didn't actually start reading sci-fi books seriously until I was in college, till I was doing my undergrad degree. I think like maybe in my freshman year or my sophomore year basically, because before that I'd been bouncing around with what I wanted to do. And it's funny because the introduction to me for sci-fi was like stereotypical in a lot of ways because I there are some sci-fi classes at under in my undergrad, program, but it was like the most in, an inhospitable place for me to be. Like I actually wasn't in those classes. I had a friend who was in those classes and I would always like meet up with them afterwards or stuff. And it was one of those things where like the bubble of the sci-fi community at that time that I was first exposed to was super like heteronormative, super like very homogenous. They were all like white college dudes, talking about the same thing with everyone else. And I remember feeling so much on the periphery of that conversation, even though I wanted to be a part of it. And I think that's where at least my draw or my love of sci-fi actually kind of began. It kind of began in opposition. I was kind of like, this really sucks that I don't have any place to do um, any worthwhile discussion. And then I luckily had like one professor though who was more into fantasy, more into sci-fi, and she did more of those kind of speculative fiction genres. But besides her, like there wasn't really that meant much for me. And so kind of my draw first to the speculative fiction genre in a serious way than just kind of a teen reader was in college. But I've always been really drawn to that genre as a whole. And yeah, I don't really know how to describe it because, as I said, it just feels very much like merging the past kind of want for escapism with also the idea. I think that speculative fiction is all about possibility, whether it's possibility in a fantasy world or possibility in space. There's so much room for imagination and so much room for interesting and unique conversations. And something that I've always been drawn to in that sphere is this idea of how these genres make us feel about our own humanity. How they make us feel, about people who have magic, people who don't have magic, all of these kind of permutations of it, and especially with sci fi, alien races and intergalactic travel. So, possibility and humanity kind of exploration has certainly been why I've kept being drawn to it after so long.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it's something that I think about too a lot, where it's just, it's like just a little tweak in our belief system in our world, and we could be somewhere else and then just experience other people's emotions and situations. And like you said, there's so much variety there. There's no end to the stories that we can just read and sit and reflect upon.
Yeah, it feels very much like throwing all these ideas into kind of like a blender and then kind of just seeing what comes out. And even if you put, it's interesting because, in fiction and literature, even if you put the same elements in, based on the perspective and based on who is telling the story, so many different things come out, even if you like start with the same building blocks. I think that is so fascinating.
What's the first story you remember enjoying?
Yeah, I love this question because I think it's so hard. That's why I love it. I It's interesting. The first story I actually think I remember reading is one of those things where like I know that I read it, but I actually don't remember anything of it. When I was in elementary school, I really loved what is it? I really loved like mystery, but interestingly enough, I didn't read Nancy Drew. I cannot remember the series of books I was reading, but it wasn't Nancy Drew. It was like something else, but a longer series. So that's like the first thing I remember kind of voraciously consuming. But I don't remember what it is, and I don't remember any of the stories. So actually, for your blog, I was kind of
Was
like,
it was it like Secret Seven or Famous Five or the Hardy Boys?
I don't know. See, I thought it was the Hardy Boys for a while, and then I was actually thinking,
Okay,
like, I don't know if it was. So
that's
I
okay.
couldn't say for your blog because I was like, I don't actually know. I might be lying if I say this. So I think the one though that I remember before, or not before that, but when I was kind of a middle grade slash teen reader, which I actually do remember reading for sure, were the Tamara Pierce books. So I think that the first series of hers that I read was Alana, which I think maybe is the first series that she wrote. Um, and I really liked that series a lot. But my favorite one was definitely Dane, so like the Wild Magic Quartet. So that was the first one. That was super formative. But I think that the thing that has been the most formative beyond that was definitely the Garthnick series I was talking about on your blog. Just because I
Yeah,
think that the Garthnick series and then like Dane and Alana, they have certainly different portrayals of main characters. It's like sort of I guess on one hand you have like necromancy, on the other hand you have fun animal magic. So it is kind of two different sides, but it's kind of like I think what I loved the most about the Sabriel series by Garth Nix is to me it felt very much like a main character who was not necessarily looking for power and not necessarily like trying to be a hero, but has heroism and has to be heroic through the circumstances of her actions. Whereas I feel like Alana and Dane, like, they want to be heroes, they want to do stuff. And I think maybe as a middle grade reader for me, or like, young teen reader, I didn't really imagine myself ever doing anything worthwhile. I kind of just felt like if I was going to do anything cool, it would just have to happen to me and not like I was going to do something cool by myself.
but you do cool things by yourself with the blog and Instagram and YouTube. It's all amazing things.
Thank you.
I also love this question. I think it's interesting because it's the first story can mean so many things. It can be you can go all the way back to your childhood, or you can pick up like important parts of your points in your life where something really resonated with you.
Yeah, yeah. I think that, yeah, I didn't even think of that, honestly, until you just said that. Like, further than that. Because I feel like that was also what I was struggling to with the question. I was trying to think of actual specific titles. I feel like when I was a kid, and I don't know about you, when you started your love of reading, but for me, it certainly was before that, before being that age, being a teenager. For me, it was like forever. With picture
It's just
books,
something
chapter
that we've
books.
always done.
So it's interesting, because I think the question that a lot of people ask, or a lot of people are given, right, is when did you become a reader, or like what was your journey with reading? And it's kind of, for me, yeah, it's just kind of been like forever, from story time ever to sort of onwards. I think ages ago on my YouTube channel, maybe in one of the first like Q&A, get to know me videos, I think that I told the story um, where, and I don't remember how old I was, and I like at all, but very small, and like certainly not very strong, very weak. But my library had a limit of 100 books per account, and obviously my mom is the one who's taking my books out, her books out, my sister's books out, so 100, it seems like a lot, but then when you divide it by three people, and also like you can read a picture book really quickly, especially when you're at that age where you're like reading them super fast. So if you have 33 only for one person, I feel like that goes by like like nothing. So in order to like curb a little bit the amounts of time we had to go to the library, and that entire process was an affair. My mom told my sister and I that we could only get out as many books as we could carry. We would
I've heard
probably
that
do it.
one.
Yeah, which it's a good idea, right? But
Yes.
then my sister and I still were like, nah, we can carry these, no problem. So we did the normal thing, right? You fill up your bag of books, and it's so heavy because the picture books and those books, they're also really thick and they're heavy, right? Um, and so my sister and my mom goes to do her library thing, right? Leaves us alone in the library for a little bit. Or, okay, not alone, but, in a different part of the library. Um, and then we are dragging out, because we're dragging them on the ground. Like, these bags are never gonna be the same after this. Um, but people feel so bad for us that they start carrying the bags of books for us to the car. And then I think that happened. My mom, like, comes out from the library and, like, just sees random people carrying bags of books, and is like, okay, I can't. Like, I can't stop this at this point. And then that was the end. It only happened once that she tried to say this to us, and then never again.
No, that didn't work out for her. You guys found other ways.
Yeah, it was mercy, like pity, mercy. I don't think there were any tears, but like if you saw a kid who was like dragging a bag of books, it's
I'm
like
gonna
it's
help them out.
yeah, exactly. It's not, it's pretty nice, and it's not something where it would be hard for someone like a grown adult to just watch someone do that and not help at all.
Tell me a bit about your reading habits. Do you read one at a time? Do you have multiple books on the go?
I This was so sad for me when I answered this question on your blog because I was thinking I'm a one book at a time kind of person. I know that that's how I thrive better, but because of reviewing, and I don't know, for example, for you, if your reading habits have changed with reviewing and your other commitments, but for me, I've now like had to start reading multiple books at a time. Um, and not even just multiple formats, audiobook versus kind of physical book versus ebook, like multiple ones. I think that sometimes I have like 5 to 6 at a time, which is like for a one book at a time kind of person. That's that's 5 times as many books as you want to be reading at a time.
Yeah, don't worry about it though. We're in good company because I'm very much the same. That with reviewing, I've just suddenly like I'm reading more. I don't know how that happens. It's like you like reading and then suddenly you get more books and then you're reading more all of a sudden and you're just somehow managing it. I was talking to my mom the other day and she's like, "How are you managing like three books on or four books, whatever, however number at the same time?" Like I just am. They are very distinct stories and they make sense to me as separate. I will have a few on the go. And what I find is that some of them, they all move at a different pace, right? That they'll start off differently. And then I find that there's a certain point that I get in a book where now I'm ready. Now I can just, this can be my one book for the next couple days until I finish. Do you find it a similar experience?
I have a real so I don't know. I'm interested to know for you how you organize your reading because of that. Because for me, I love my bullet journal. So
Yeah,
for
same.
for me, I will. I'm also like I would love to be a mood reader, but I just like the
Mhm.
anxiety
Yeah.
around that would just like tear me apart every night.
No, I think we can have like a whole hour conversation just on that.
Yeah, I actually, but seriously though, I one of the things that I really love when I finally get to talk to other book content creators and book bloggers specifically is conversations about how you structure your reading schedule, how you structure all of that, because I
Yeah.
think that it's such an integral part of being a person on the internet who wants to create regular content. And I also don't feel
Yeah.
like people talk about it enough. Um,
Right.
on for your transcript, like for your blog post where you talk a little bit more about it like later on in the interview, but I think that that's one of the things that is the hardest. We were talking about it before, figuring out what works for you, what doesn't work for you, and figuring out an organization system and how you balance reading and how you balance different books is like kind of the uphill battle at the very beginning.
Yeah, and similar to the blog and creating content, it takes a while to get a system which works for us. Because I've gone through so many iterations of using this and using that, and then just using something else.
Yeah, so I feel like when I said bullet journal, I feel like I saw a spark in your eyes. I When I first started taking this super seriously, because at the beginning I started it kind of for fun, and then I started taking it more seriously up until now, and when I started taking it more seriously, I tried in my bullet journal to write physically, like all the books that would be coming out that I had in arcs on the month, and also like all the books that I had. Um, and I quickly realized that that was impossible to maintain. Like it was just never gonna happen. But you're saying like I was doing that for a while, and then I literally sometimes then had physical post-it notes that I would keep on my cabinet. I tried that system for a while, and that just got like the guilt of
Yeah,
that was
I did
immense.
that too. Yeah.
Yeah, but now I do it online because
Yeah.
the progress and the pacing just makes all these handwritten ones so time consuming.
Yeah, and I feel like there's a weight to them. To have something handwritten in front of me the whole time, I'm going to be stressing about it a lot more than if it's just in a spreadsheet or it's in an organized system. It just makes more sense.
Yeah, I agree. But I kind of feel like I'm organizationally, I think that online works better. I feel more clear headed about it. But I do feel sometimes like if there was a little bit more guilt, maybe I'd get a little bit more done. I sometimes miss, seeing it in front of my eyes and being like, are you seriously trying to do this? It's a reality check, when you see it physically.
Yeah.
It's easier to be like, oh, yeah, I'll read that book when it's online. And then,
I think that's why I've started like writing names of books as I think of them. Like I'll be reading something and I'll be journaling, and then I'll just somehow think of some random book that I want to get to or just saw somewhere, and I'll write it down. And hopefully if I write it down enough times, then I'll eventually add it to my system so that I can prioritize it and read it.
yeah, I have like a whole list of books where I have a list of books that are overdue, which is, a total shame fest for me. And then I have another list of in my organizational system of like books for what is it? Future books. And this is yeah, it's
Yeah,
exactly what you're
I
talking
have
about.
that list too.
Yeah, like books where they're overdue for sure, but it's like I really want to read it, I will read it. And then,
Yeah.
it just stays there.
Yeah, I have a very similar list, which is books for, it's like my future list. I'm not getting to them in the next 5 years, maybe in the next 10 years, but I definitely want to get to them at some point.
Yeah, there's no specific date on that anymore, and it just ends up like every month it's like I'll try to pick one from that list.
So, since you try to pick one, how do you decide your next read? Like, so you generally know it in advance.
Yeah, I try to read. with release dates, like a schedule in my mind. So in my organizational Trello board, right, I'll have like a list of, them by my month, and then obviously sorted by date. So that's kind of how I try to do it. And then obviously some other factors are if I'm doing like a blog tour slash, if I've made a dated commitment, those have to have priority on a different list. Then
Yeah, for sure.
yeah, otherwise and then funnily enough, for that I also have when I always bring the next month over, I pull it to the left. I then go through it, and then I make a sub section list for priority within that month. So basically, books that I really 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 want to get to that I have no formal commitment to. And then so it's like a formal commitment, informal commitment, wish list kind of thing. And I try to like prioritize it in that way, for how I pick my next read.
Yeah, your wish list is my hopefuls. Like, hopefully, I will get to that.
Yeah, the backlog is intense. I was thinking about doing like a series where I talk about my backlog, but then I realized I don't think I actually I don't think I'd have the heart and patience to edit that. I would feel so sad and so ashamed and like
I feel
upset.
like we will record one video about it, and then yeah, we should just go read that book.
Yeah, right. It'd be like while I'm editing this, I really probably should be reading at least one of these.
Rather than thinking about this book, if I just spend the time reading about this book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I do think of that, at the end of the month when I move all the ones that I didn't read to
Yeah.
my overdue list, then I'm like, oh,
Hmm.
this list only gets bigger, but I feel like it very rarely is getting smaller.
It's hard, right? Because you keep finding more books. How do you discover books?
I'm very easily influenced. I I think it's funny when people call I've had some people, yeah, like call me like an influencer to my face. And I do think it's funny because I don't feel that way because of how easily
Yeah.
I'm influenced, you know? Um, and I don't know, it feels interesting to me. I much prefer like content creator because that's kind of how I feel
Yeah.
more than kind of influencer because I feel like it's very hard.
It's hard to gauge like how much you actually influenced anyone. But
Yeah.
as a content creator, you know that's what you're doing.
Yeah,
You
no, I
love doing
definitely
that.
agree.
So that's what you do.
Yeah, and I don't know about you. I mean, I've gotten this question sometimes in the past, like what makes all of the work worth it? And I think one of the things or one of my answers has always been, when someone will tell you that you picked up a book because of them, or sorry, that they picked up a book because of you. I do think that that is one of the reasons why I keep doing, what I do. But I think that that kind of happens really rarely. I don't know if about you, but I feel like I rarely have people who are like, "Oh, I picked this book up because of you," because it takes an extra step. It's like those people who leave product reviews, you know?
Yeah, no, it is rare, but I think for me, it really helps to have, friends and family who like reading. So once in a while, if they ask for a recommendation or if we end up somehow reading the same book, that's what makes it amazing for me. That I can talk about what I'm reading with someone else, whether they are, in the same city as me or they're in a different country, it doesn't matter. If just that connection is what keeps me going.
Yeah, and I think that one of the things I've loved about when you asked me, and also your content as well and your collaborative content, is I think that sometimes being a book reviewer or book content person on the internet can feel really isolating. And so what I love so much about your collaborative stuff is it shrinks the distance, where between two people who may not organically have people, in their lives who are reading that, or, avid readers. And it fosters a sense of community. And I think that that is so precious.
Ah, thank you so much. I'm glad that you like it. Well, I have one more question, and that is about the platform. So you're on BookTube, you have Bookstagram, and you also have your amazing blog. How do you manage all these platforms? Like, there's obviously the reading management and organization side of it. What about the other side?
Yeah, I do agree with you. I feel like the reading management is certainly one thing, and then how you plan what you want to post is certainly another thing. And I also feel like, I mean, I'm sure that you and I could have this conversation forever because I think that it's so
Yeah.
relevant, but how.
Yeah, and it's another one that we don't talk about enough. It's
Mhm.
right?
I actually think that one of the things I've been talking about, I don't know about you, but when I first started blogging, Um, I've had a lot of people who I used to blog with a lot have quit since then.
Yeah.
The burnout in this creative sphere or this creative book, book platform or book world is pretty high, and I think that part of that reason is kind of related to this question of balancing multiple things. It feels all the time like you have to do everything. Like you.
There's that, and I noticed that more with Instagram. Maybe because I interacted more with people there than I ever did on the blogging side. But people have like amazing content. But after a little bit, at least for myself, like I want to do, I want to take good photos, but I also want to, keep it slightly different. Like I'm trying to incorporate different things, and sometimes when it becomes the same, that's when people start to kind of leave it, because now it's not fun anymore. Now you've kind of figured out like this is how I like to take photos, and this is what is in my photos every time. And it I love seeing those photos, but I don't know how, as a creator, how fulfilling that is.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a recurring theme, right, in our conversation about trying to figure out your own niche and your own voice.
Yeah.
That's really hard. And what I think that has helped me balance the platforms is one day, I think last year, I kind of broke down in my head, okay, say I had someone who's following me on all my platforms, which would be the goal, obviously, but like, say, say someone was. If you were, what do I want to be exclusive on each platform? Right? Because if I'm really doing everything on every platform, it doesn't give anyone an incentive to like follow me on all of them and follow anyone on all of them. So I think what has helped me the most in approaching balancing multiple platforms is really figuring out what am I going to post on this specific platform that I'm not going to post elsewhere. So for me, when I broke it down, I was thinking, okay, if you want to read book reviews written by me, you have to go to the blog because the amount of book reviews that I'm publishing is just impossible to promote everywhere, right? So that's that. That was super easy for me in this breakdown. And then I was thinking, okay, for Bookstagram, obviously aesthetics are huge, right? So
Yeah.
obviously, if photos are your thing, that should be Bookstagram. But for me as well, what I've loved the most about Bookstagram for me is that it's been a space to experiment a little bit with what I want to do. So, that's where I was doing all the book makeup stuff. And that has been where it's staying on Bookstagram, like book makeup stuff. And also, I've been dabbling in digital art, like,
Hmm.
digital stuff. Not very well, but I have been dabbling in it. And so, Bookstagram is the place that's. And then
Yeah.
Twitter. Okay, for a while I thought that Twitter was going to be the platform where I could be the most unhinged and where I could just like go off and say whatever I want. And I do think that Twitter is really easy for those short thoughts. Like I think I post a lot sometimes about like dreams I've had, that are book related. So I think Twitter very much is kind of like very quick, personal, kind of weird updates, and so that's what I've been using it for as well. So that for example, that's where that is. Although if you want to see pictures of the things I'm eating, it's only Bookstagram. Like I'm not posting that on Twitter.
Yeah.
And then BookTube, so YouTube, right, has been
Yeah.
not really focused on book reviews at all. It's been more like talking in depth about things. Or haul videos or wrap ups. I've stopped doing wrap ups on my blog at all, mostly because I realized they were becoming really redundant with the BookTube wrap ups. And also, what I've liked about BookTube as well is that it's easier for me to kind of like do a one sentence or a one paragraph mini review of something in a list than it feels like for
Hmm.
me to type it out and like edit it, you know? Um,
Yeah.
and Book Talk has certainly been the latest addition to my little group of social
Oh,
media,
okay.
and that's now become where I get to say whatever I want. I think when you're on TikTok as a whole, you get a varied amount of videos that are pushed to you, right? So for me, Book Talk has been really short reviews. I've tried to do like a whole set of unfiltered reviews where I kind of just will not edit it at all and just do a very
Yeah.
short, less than 3 minute review. That's where those are. They live on Book Talk. Also, like anything, if you want to hear any of my thoughts about Taylor Swift, that ends up on Book Talk. Like it ends up being a very eclectic kind of mix. Also, I've treated it like someone also told me, I think within the last couple of years, try to approach Book Talk more as kind of like a searchable and archivable Instagram story. So you
Mm.
can put hashtags in it. And so, for example, for me, if I have random thoughts like, oh, you know, what is the difference? I did one the other day, like, what's the difference between YA and adult books for other people? What are
Hmm.
you looking for differences? And that, the stories go away in 24 hours on Instagram. But I think that's been the good thing about Book Talk is that it stays there forever, and you can search it. And also, some people will like the notifications on Book Talk are truly strange. I've gotten somewhere like someone has favorited or someone has liked a video that I posted like 2 years ago, or it's maybe not 2 years ago, because I don't think I've been on Book Talk for that long, but like a very very old thing. So it's kind of content that gets pushed in very weird, mysterious ways. But I've enjoyed that a lot recently, like being able to kind of post quick 15-second, 30-second things and have them stay in a way I can reference. The archiving
Hmm.
thing on Instagram is really hard for me to. That is the very, very long winded answer to your question. I think that the TLDR of that obviously is just like to think about what is different for you and what works different, because not everything works the same on all of the platforms. Like the
Yeah.
presentation, captions, hashtags, not everything works the same. So it's twofold.
Yeah, I really liked hearing your thought process around it. I need to go do that after this. Putting it in words and saying it for how you want it to work for yourself, that really clarifies why you're on it. Because I've not done what you did, but I've thought about like why am I on these platforms? What am I trying to get out of them? So I need to look at it from the content side of things. But that just having that initial conversation around why am I here and what do I want to take away from it really made it a much easier place to stay in. Well, that brings us to the end of our questions. There are a few other questions, but those are posted on the blog and you guys can check it out over there.
Do you want to do your like a run through of basically where everyone can find you on the internet? Obviously, that will be in like the description box of the video, but for the video purposes, do you want to share where everyone can find you?
Sure. I blog at Armed with a Book, so it's armedwithabook.com. I'm on Instagram and Twitter. My handle is underscore armed with a book. I am not yet on BookTube. We will see if I get there, and I'm not yet on Book Talk, so we will see if I get there. But that I'm on Twitter and Instagram, and of course my blog.
Well, I hope everyone has a really great rest of your day. And please comment, let's see, comment below other questions that you have that we have not discovered or answered or given to each other. And also, though, you have to read the blog post first, because it doesn't count if your question is the same as one we've already answered on the blog. So you have to go first there and then come back and then give a completely new, different question. And then maybe we could do a follow up with you.
For sure.
Getting into the nitty gritty of like how people organize stuff, because I love talking about organization so much.
Yeah, no, definitely we should plan to do it.
Okay, well, bye everyone.
Bye. Thanks for watching.